Whenever you're ready.
Could I have your attention, please? I want to welcome you to the annual meeting of the Socorro County Historical Society. And we have a little bit of business. And when I say little bit, it means a little bit. And but mostly every year we always have a public presentation on some aspect of Socorro history, Socorro County history. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Baca here, Robert Baca. We've emailed him back and forth a few times and shared our histories, and it's the first time I've met him, so that's a pleasure. And anyway, he has a nice presentation for us today. As you can see, the title is The Life and Death in Small Town, New Mexico. And I think as most everybody's aware, we have all these little villages along the river, and they all just have an amazing amount of history. And I know one thing that I always enjoy with my historical research is not just when this building was built and this and that, but the families, you know, and I think we can all have an appreciation when we look back 100, 150 years ago at how rough life must have been before Walmart and cell phones. And, you know, and we really have to take our hats off to those early colonists and settlers that, you know, developed, you know, these villages and Socorro and Lematar and such as they are. And before I go much on, I think I'll let the expert give us the true story. So it's my privilege to introduce Robert Baca, a genealogist and historian, and the former president of the New Mexico Genealogical Society.
Yes.
And so there's no doubt he knows more than I do. So.
Well, thank you, Paul. I know that you've written a lot about history. I've read about it. You've written actually a lot about my family. I remember seeing something about Jose Epitacio Torres in one of your things. That's my great-great-grandfather. And there's actually a lot of, I always like to say that, you know, if I came to Socorro and threw a rock, I'd hit a relative, okay? Because I'm probably related to 90%, if not 100% of the Hispanic people here, and probably about half of the Anglo, okay? Just to give you a little information, I wasn't actually born in Socorro. I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada. But I grew up here. 3 months after I was born, my parents brought me back here. This is where they grew up. This is where their parents grew up, and so forth. I am among my ancestors are those who founded this city, who back in 1815, 1816. My ancestors were Civil War soldiers. My ancestors were founders of Belen, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and so forth. Originally from Spain, many of them, and at least one from Switzerland and one from Germany, okay? And of course, many Native American ancestors too, okay? Oftentimes we don't know who those people are because they're not written in the records and such, but New Mexico historians and genealogists have actually found many, many different Native American ancestry. And if you look at my DNA, I've got about 20% Native American blood, okay? About 50% Spanish, and then various other mixtures, okay? But we're not going to talk so much about me. We're going to talk a little bit about Socorro and surrounding communities. Whoa, what the heck? I hate when it does that. Okay, there's a very sensitive computer here. All right, so my title is Life and Death in Small Town, New Mexico. My intention was to talk about a bunch of different families. And I realized that I can't tell a really short story. So I'm actually going to talk about two families. One that is not directly related to me, but is related to me through their ancestry, and one that I'm directly descended from. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. And the first thing I want to kind of give you a basic information about the people that we're talking about. Okay, so around 20,000 years ago, in what is now the Tularosa Basin in the White Sands National Monument, early humans walked along the shore of a lake, leaving footprints in the wet sand. Over time, these prints were buried under layers of sediment, preserving them for thousands of years. Recently, archaeologists uncovered these ancient traces. By carbon dating pollen embedded in the footprints, scientists determined that a group of people once gathered water there. The evidence suggests that adults were engaged in daily tasks, teenagers collected water, and children played along the lakeshore. This remarkable discovery is now considered the earliest known evidence of human presence in North America. It predates other significant finds such as Clovis Point scattered throughout the Americas. These findings confirm that some of the first inhabitants of the New World lived in what is now south-central New Mexico and arrived 20 millennia before Spanish colonizers. When Spaniards began exploring New Mexico, beginning in 1540 AD, actually a little bit earlier than that, but that's when Coronado came in, they encountered many different Indian pueblos along the way. In 1598, Juan de Oñate brought the first wave of colonists into New Mexico. Early families in that group and in subsequent 17th century arrivals included people who were the ancestors of later Socorro families. These included Baca, Duran and Chavez, Montoya, and Torres families, and many others. When the first Spanish colonists traveled along the Royal Road, or El Camino Real, they passed through a long stretch of desert known as the Jornada del Muerto, or Dead Man's Path. Not much water can be found in that area. When they encountered the Piro Indians, who were the Piro Pueblos who lived around this area here, the people there gave them water and food to help them out. Thus they called the Pueblo Socorro, or help. Spanish settlement along the Rio Bajo was, Rio Bajo, by the way, is the lower river. So if you go to, I'm trying to think what it is. Go up towards Santa Fe. That's the Rio Riba, okay, upper river. And then Rio Bajo is down from Santa Fe, okay? So when I'm talking about Rio Bajo, I'm talking about places like Albuquerque, Belen, Socorro, etc., okay? So when the first Spanish colonists traveled, sorry, I lost my space. Spanish settlement along the Rio Bajo was fairly sparse. The Nuestra Señora de Socorro mission was built there by 1630, and its ruins can still be found displayed within the current San Miguel Church. If you go there, you'll see a little glass that shows what looks like adobe, and it's thought to be the old church, okay? Not much is known about the residences of these areas at that time, other than Luis Lopez, whose hacienda named the village of the same name. In 1680, Pueblo Indians revolted against the Spaniards. This coordinated effort led to the death of many Spanish colonists and the expulsion of Spain from the Kingdom of New Mexico. Survivors lived for 12 years in what is now the areas surrounding El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico. Many families fled into the Nueva España, which is what Mexico used to be called. The remnant of the New Mexico colony returned with Diego de Vargas in 1692 and 1693. In the meantime, parents had more children, and children became adults and married during this period. Okay, so they lived in these areas near El Paso. They started building their families. Some people left, some people came back. Other families were recruited in Nueva España and helped the recolonization of New Mexico by the Spanish crown. These included Abeta, Garcia Jorado, and Silva families. These two would be families that would have descendants in Socorro. Socorro, which lay in ruins since the Pueblo Revolt, would not be resettled until 1815 or 1860. The San Miguel Church was not built until 1821. I previously discussed the families of Socorro in detail during other presentations. You can find one of my presentations on YouTube. Now, I want to focus on certain individuals, men and women, who lived and died in Socorro County. While they may not be widely recognized by many local history enthusiasts, their contributions left a lasting mark in our community. So Ultima Montoya was a sheep rancher, businessman, and politician who was a staunch defender of the Socorro land grant. He was born on December 23rd, 1854 in San Antonio, New Mexico. He was the son of Estanislao Montoya and Maria Francisca Garcia. Through his parents, he was related to Baca, Montoya, and Garcia Geraldo families that founded Socorro and traced their lineage back to the founders of Belen and beyond. He was also a third great-grandson of Josefa Baca, a single mother who owned land in Pajarito, north of Isleta. This lineage is not unusual among the Socorro community. Although I'm not a direct descendant of Ultima Montoya, I am descended from his ancestors. Okay, and I do have, just to show you here, his ancestry. If you ever go to Pajarito, to the Hubble House, you'll see a plaque for Josefa Baca. In fact, I have that little picture right here. And so he's descended from her. I am too. Again, from a lot of Bacas, a lot of Garcia Geraldos. Again, these are people who founded Socorro, like Dionisio Antonio, Ana Maria Sanchez, Pablo Garcia, and Michaela Baca, etc. Okay, the Montoyas. These are founding families of Socorro. Just a second here. On May 15th, 1875, Ultima married Guadalupe Luna, the daughter of Ramon Luna. In her obituary, published on February 12th, 1897, in the Socorro Chieftain, she is described as being born of an old Spanish family of this territory and having gentle manners and a rare lady of breeding, and was noted for her many kind deeds. Although praised highly in this article, as was the custom at the time, her name was not mentioned. She is simply listed as Mrs. Ultima Montoya. So, yeah, and that was, again, something that was common at that time, okay? I mean, it was common even when I was growing up. My grandmother always put her name as Mrs. Santiago Baca, even though her name was Pablita. You know, that's just the way that people did that, okay? As a trustee of the original grantees and heirs, Ultima Montoya brought a lawsuit in the United States Court of Private Land Claims on February 23rd, 1893. On June 6, 1899, the Albuquerque Citizen newspaper summarized the history of the case. I put a little bit of that right here. As I have confirmed the facts of the case through the historical sketch written by land grant historian J.J. Bowden and my own research of court documents, I find this newspaper to be historically correct. I posted a transcription of the article on my Socorro Land Grant Research Project blog, and I will read an edited version here. Private land claims. The Socorro case will be first taken up at this term. The Court of Private Land Claims met Monday morning in the federal building at Santa Fe, but owing to the absence of the United States attorneys, adjourned until today. The impression prevails that the court will be in session for a few days at Santa Fe because of Tucson. The Tucson term gave the judges work for about 2 months. In writing opinions, they have rendered no decision as to yet in the San Rafael and other important land cases heard in Tucson. And then the article names a number of court officials. The first matter to be taken up by the court will be the Socorro town case, which is docketed as number 127, Ultima Montoya versus United States, filed February 27, 1893. The grant compromises 843,259.59 acres, although the plaintiffs claim considerably more. Okay, this is a huge land grant that they had claimed. Okay. In 1815, 70 families of Spanish subjects settled in what is now Socorro County at the request and permission of the governor of the province of New Mexico. November 18, 1817, Javier Garcia, by the way, one of my ancestors, and Anselmo Chafoya, on behalf of themselves and the 70 families, presented a petition to the governor, and the petition and the captain general to make sure that the 4 square leagues of land on which the petitioner had settled. Such a grant was made, and the alcalde, or the mayor or administrator of Belen, commanded to make the property as the property certificate. This the alcalde neglected to do. The petitioners, therefore, on August 1st, 1818, petitioned again, and on December 2nd, 1845, Governor Manuel Armijo renewed the grant, and the papers drawn up at the time of the evidence are in the evidence of the case. The Surveyor General of the territory in 1875 recommended that the grant be confirmed. The Surveyor General in 1886 recommended to Congress the grant to original settlers and their descendants on the Socorro grant an equitable claim to the lands actually occupied and used for tillage and pasturage prior to February 2nd, 1848. The Congress took no actions on these recommendations. The survey in 1875 set the area of the grant as 841,259.5 acres, but the plaintiffs claimed that that it should be greater. All claims and all owners of the land are such by permission and consent of the petitioners, excepting Wilson Waddingham, Martin B. Hayes, Felipe Peralta, and Thomas Cordova, who lay claim to certain portions of the grant. On the grant are situated the towns and settlements of San Antonio, Limatar, that's how often it's spelled, with an I, Limatar, San Lorenzo, Luis Lopez, Bosquecito, and San Pedro. Ultimo brought the case before the court because the 800,000 acre land grant was previously approved by the U.S. Survey General, but then denied by the United States government. Ultimately, the grant would be approved in a lawsuit brought by Candelario Garcia and the city of Socorro. However, that grant was much smaller, being 4 square leagues, emanating out of from the center of the, actually from the, basically the altar of the San Miguel Church in 4 cardinal directions. So it would go 1 league north, 1 league south, 1 league east, 1 league west, okay? A league is approximately 3 miles. This was the standard size of land grants issued by the Spanish government to New Mexico communities. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, I got a little lost here. Okay, sorry. Okay. However, this is not the only case brought before the United States courts. In a letter from the Secretary of Interior of the U.S. House of Representatives relayed in 1880, and Estanislao Montoya, who is the father of Ultimo, okay? And his sons Diaz Montoya and Ultimo Montoya claimed that Mescalero Apaches stole 8,000 sheep and 15 burros. The sheep were worth $1 each, while the burros were worth $20 each. Affidavits were taken from Ricardo Pino and Mauricio Miera, who were Estanislao's sons-in-law. The relationship was not mentioned in the document. I just know that because of my research. Since the U.S. Indian agent was stationed 140 miles away, he was not able to personally investigate the claim. The Apaches at the reservation denied that they took the stock. After both his father and his brother died, Ultima, through his family's company, E. Montoya and Sons, brought a lawsuit claiming that because Victorio and his band had caused depredations and effectively was a warring nation, that the U.S. government and Apaches were responsible for the loss. However, the U.S. Supreme Court decided against the company, stating that the Apache were not a nation and that the United States Congress had not declared war against the Apache. It decided that neither the United States or the tribe was responsible for the property taken by off-reservation bands. So you can see it right here. I pulled this off of the internet. It's an actual U.S. Supreme Court case. Okay, so we actually went into the Supreme Court at least once. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about Ultimo's father now. Okay, this guy right here. I don't have a picture of Ultimo, but I do have a picture of his father. This is Stanislao. Okay. Ultimo's father, Stanislao himself, was a remarkable yet controversial person. According to the 1891 book, History of New Mexico, from the Spanish conquest to the present time, 1530 to 1890, and Stanislao was born in Socorro a few years after the founding of the community on December 9th, 1819. He received the benefits of an ordinary school education and moved with his family and others to San Antonio in 1847. When Texas Confederates invaded New Mexico, he was appointed by Governor Connolly and as Brigadier General of the New Mexico Militia. In 1864, he led 10 companies of the militia against the Navajos in the Mogollon Mountains, killing 20 men, capturing 50 women and children, and a large number of sheep and horses. This, of course, was one of the conflicts that led up to the infamous Long Walk, where the Navajo people were forcibly relocated. He was a mine speculator who supplied coal to Fort Craig and later hired as a settler, providing provisions to the fort. Stanislao served one term as probate judge in Socorro and was succeeded by his son, Desidero. According to the article, he amassed hundreds of thousands of dollars and used the money to help land grantees of the Socorro grant gain title to their properties. He died on August 8, 1884. And Ultimo himself, the son, was a politician, holding the position of the chairman of the Socorro County Commission in 1891 and 1892. He died on May 25th, 1904 in Mineral Wells, Texas, where he was receiving treatment for kidney disease, described as Wright's disease in his obituary. I love finding these obscure terms that they used back in the 1800s for diseases that we no longer use, and Wright's disease is the one that they use here. He apparently had shown improvement before he died. His funeral was held in San Antonio, New Mexico on June 3rd. The Honorable E.B. Chavez stated that the funeral was the largest ever held in Socorro County. Okay. And so that is those are the Montoyas. Stanislao Montoya was not the only Civil War veteran who lived in Socorro County. Many local Hispanics joined the New Mexico militia, while many other Civil War veterans made Socorro their home after serving at Fort Craig and other forts in the territory. These included Luis Maria Baca, Canuto Torres, Richard Stackpole, Cesario Lopez, Candelaria Garcia, Samuel Meek, Jesus Maria Chavez, and my second great-grandfather, Philip Bourguignon, and many others. So there are quite a lot of Civil War soldiers who lived here. Okay. Some soldiers who came to New Mexico from outside the territories stayed to start families with local women, speculate in mining, and start businesses. One such person was my other second great-grandfather, Samuel Zimmerly. So Philip Bourguignon was on my dad's side, Samuel Zimmerly on my mom's side. Okay, and yes, he is the ancestor of Chuck Zimmerly back there too. Okay. In the summer of 1861, Confederates from Texas began occupying southern New Mexico. By December, Confederate troops were marching up the Rio Grande. Confederate troops also began heading towards Tucson, Arizona. It was known that they were seeking California gold. In response, over 70,000 men joined the Union Army in that state. 2,350 of those men would be known collectively as the California Column. They began marching into Arizona to meet the Confederate invaders. By the way, there's a reason why we have California Street. It is the California Column. Okay. By the time they arrived in Tucson, the invaders had left. The column saw a few minor skirmishes, and the rebels had left New Mexico by the time troops sighted the Rio Grande on August 7th, 1862. However, the importance of the California Column cannot be dismissed as unimportant. Texas did not invade New Mexico again, probably in fear of confronting this formidable force. Samuel Zimmerly was living in California when he joined the Army on October 3rd, 1861. This sandy-haired carpenter signed his name to the muster rolls at Camp Latham, a military installation near Los Angeles. We don't know how or when Samuel moved to California. We can only guess why. Many people had come to California during the 1849 gold rush seeking fortune. Now, this would have been a number of years afterwards because he was fairly young at that time. Okay? Apparently, Samuel was not one of the fortunate ones, as his occupation indicates. He may have joined the Army in order to find consistent employment, or he may have been seeking adventure. A transcription of the regimental descriptive book gives a description of Samuel Zimmerly. He had a sandy complexion, black eyes, and sandy hair. He was 5'8", 5 foot 8 inches tall, and was 21 years old when he joined. This means he was born circa 1840. A family history claims that Samuel's exact date of birth was March 14, 1837. However, no documents could be found to confirm that date. One other piece of information in that description is perplexing. It indicates that Samuel's place of birth was Luzerne, Pennsylvania. Luzerne is a county of the state. However, this information conflicts with Samuel Zimmerly's marriage record that indicates he was actually from Switzerland. Okay. And you'll find that a lot of the Civil War soldiers were from various other countries like Ireland, Switzerland, Germany, etc. Okay. Samuel was in the 1st Regiment of the California Infantry, Company B. This company was stationed in Fort Yuma, California on January 1st, 1862. On April 22nd, the company traveled from the fort to the Arizona Territory and finally to Mesilla, New Mexico by November 27th. Over the next couple of years, Samuel traveled with his company to at least 6 other locations, eventually ending up at Fort Craig, New Mexico on July 31st, 1864. Fort Craig was a military installation about 30 miles south of Socorro. You can still see the ruins if you go down there. It was established in 1854 after the short-lived Fort Conrad was abandoned. The fort was originally set up to protect the local residents of the area from Apache raids, but had seen one of the 2 Civil War battles in New Mexico, the Battle of Val Verde. The Union lost the battle, but the Confederates made the mistake of leading troops in the rear. When Confederates retreated after the Battle of Glorieta north of Santa Fe, troops in the fort shadowed them, making sure that they left the territory. However, that was in the past. Samuel Zimmerly and his comrades faced no enemy army. Instead, they spent time in this remote fort in the middle of the desert. The fort was near the end of the Jornada de Muerto. The only aspect that these soldiers would be able to find was in the community nearby, Socorro. After mustering out on November 3rd, 1864, Samuel went to Socorro. Within 2 years, he met and married a local woman, Maria Pabla Torres. They were married in the San Miguel Parish on September 29th, 1866. The church indicates that Samuel was de Suiza, or of Switzerland, and that his parents were Santiago Zimmerly and Maria Schuss. Since Santiago is not a Swiss name, his father was probably actually James. Currently, we don't know much about Samuel's heritage. However, we know quite a lot about his wife's lineage. Maria Pabla Torres was baptized in San Miguel Parish on June 9, 1849. She was born 3 days prior in Socorro. Her parents were Ricardo Torres and Gertrudis Padilla. There's a lot of Ricardos and Gertrudises in my family, okay, among the Zimmerlys and such. The record also lists her grandparents. Her paternal grandparents were Agustin Torres and Felipa Baca, while her maternal grandparents were Lorenzo Padilla and Maria Josefa Montoya. Her godparents were Jose Molina and Catalina Abeta. Okay. Here is her ancestry, which again goes pretty far back. On here, I can actually go much further than this. You can see Torres, Baca is another Josefa Baca there. Same Josefa Baca, just a different place. Garcia Gerardo, which is a very important family here in Socorro, and others. So you can see going back centuries there. Pabla's father was originally from Los Trujillos, a plaza of Belen, a community about 40 miles north of Socorro. Jose Ricardo Torres was born on March 31st, 1808, probably in Belen, and was baptized 3 days later in Tomé. Ricardo's parents married after August 5th, 1806, when their prenuptial investigation was completed. This was done frequently to make sure that a couple was not related, although they always were. They always were like first cousins and stuff like that. But they still had to do that. They figured, New Mexico's a small community, we can small area. Cousins are going to marry, but we still have to do the paperwork. Okay, and there was a church, of course, doing it. This investigation shows that Agustin Torres and Felipa Baca's marriage was less than perfect. Augustine had an illicit tryst with Felipa's cousin prior to their marriage. Apparently, this was well known in the community, as 61-year-old Jose Antonio Montoya proclaimed that he knew of the affair. Even though he had sex with the intendant's cousin and not his own, this would have still been considered incest. Okay? The Bishop of Durango, Mexico, had a priest continue to investigate the matter to make sure Augustine was free to marry. A dispensation was granted, and the bishop ordered a local priest to publish the marriage bans 3 times before the wedding could be conducted. Although there is no evidence to the fact, it can be speculated that Augustine and Felipa left Belen to get away from this controversy. Felipa's parents were among the founders of Socorro. Augustine and Felipa had children both in Belen and Socorro, being among the firstborn in this community. Their descendants included not only the Zimmerlys, but the Stackpoles and some of the Mieras, Abetas, and others. Samuel and Pabla Zimmerly had their first child, Juan Jose, on January 14th, 1868. As you see, he married Isabel Torres. You'll see a lot of Torreses married into this family. To support his family, Sam began doing carpentry work. However, rheumatism began to interfere with his physical labor. In military pension documents, he claimed that he contracted the disease as a soldier. In the summer of 1862, he was exposed to damp, wet weather. He was treated at the regimental hospital in Tucson, Arizona territory while stationed there. On February 19, 1886, Samuel signed the declaration for a military invalid pension, stating that he was unable to perform manual labor. He stated that he was 48 at the time, which confirms that 1837 birth date for him. Two more Zimmerly children were born in the 1870s. Gertrudis, born on June 1st, 1871. She married Arminio Torres. And Ricardo, born May 6, 1876, and he married Eloisa Stacco, who, by the way, had a Taurus mother. Okay, again, Taurus is all over the place. On February 1st, 1873, Samuel Zimmerly took possession and occupied land in the Socorro land grant, built a grist mill, a house, and other buildings on the property. This area where Samuel had his land would eventually be known as Park City. Park City was a small settlement at the foot of the Socorro Mountains. They have mountains here in Socorro. The community disappeared in the 1900s, but in its heyday, in addition to the Zimmerly mill, it had a smelter, a hotel, a store, 3 saloons, a school, and homes for 300 people who resided there. Samuel's grist mill was commonly known as Zimmerly's mill, but he often advertised it as Excelsior Mills. Samuel ground wheat for a toll and advertised that he would pay cash for wheat and other grain. The Zimmerlys offered the community a needed service. However, it appears that he did not always get along with the locals. In February 1879, Socorro residents protested milling prices. They demanded that Samuel Zimmerly and other mill owners increase by 5 pounds the amount of flour they ground from a fanega of wheat. They said that this was only fair since the millers were using the Socorro springs to grind the wheat. Millers said that it was impossible to get that much flour from that amount of wheat. The protesters threatened to burn down the mills. However, saner heads prevailed, and the mill was kept producing flour for years to come. In the 1880s, Samuel and Pablo had their 6 children. Maria Dolores was born on March 3rd, 1881. She married Ricardo Ebeta. And Teresa was born on September 24th, 1984, and she married Stanislao Miera, okay, who, by the way, is related to the Montoya I mentioned, okay? And then on October 30th, 1887, my great-grandfather, Esteban Delvino Zimmerly, married Delfina Torres. Esteban died in the 1930s, but I knew Delfina. I remember her as a kid. She spoke Spanish, I didn't, so I never understood her, but I do remember going to her house frequently, okay? If you're wondering, for those who might know her, she was Pablita Baca's mother, okay? Pablita married to Santiago. That's on my mother's side. Yes, I'm Baca on both sides of my family. And no, they're not related that way. Okay. But anyhow, they and to give a little bit more information, Chuck Zimmerly is descended from Ricardo Zimmerly. Okay. He's my mom's second cousin. Right. By the time that his son was born, Samuel was dying. His health was deteriorating. His rheumatism had worsened and he was completely unable to work. His last child 21 days after Esteban was born, Samuel died. So Esteban never knew his father. Okay. Samuel Zimmerly was laid to rest in the San Miguel Cemetery in Socorro, New Mexico. A military headstone read Samuel Zimmerly, Company B, 1st California Infantry, was placed over his grave. A simple obituary for Samuel was posted in Socorro Bulletin on November 26th of that year. Samuel Zimmerly, one of the earliest settlers of Socorro County, died at his home last Saturday evening. Mr. Zimmerly has resided in this city for a number of years, and during that time, he has been actively engaged in the milling business. For sometime, the disease which finally caused his death has rendered him an invalid and at times a great sufferer. He leaves a wife and 6 children to mourn his death, while his host of friends sympathize with the bereaved family. Samuel's friend Luis Maria Baca, remember I mentioned he was also a Civil War soldier, by the way, second great grand uncle of mine, okay, was set up as administrator for his estate. Samuel left his widow with a considerable amount of land, real estate, and personal property. An 1888 tax assessment showed that she owned 178 acres in Park City, 6 3/4 acres in Cuba, which is south of Socorro, and 4 acres in San Francisco, north of Socorro. So you'll see these towns, Cuba, San Francisco, there's a bunch of them all around New Mexico, okay? And these are just places here near Socorro. In real estate, they owned a dwelling in the gristmill in Park City, and in personal property, they owned 2 ponies, 23 head of cattle, 13 hogs, wagon, carriage, buggy, various machines, a billiard table, very important, household goods, and 200 pounds of flour. As often occurs when a husband dies, Pablo probably had to pay off debts and, of course, find a way to feed her family. Therefore, she sold off some of the land. In the 1889 assessment, she only had 53 1/3 acres of land in Park City, while continuing to have the same amount of land as before in Cuba and San Francisco. She owned 3 shares of the grist mill, and her son, Juan Jose Zimmerly, owned 1/6 of the grist mill. Juan Jose also owned a dwelling and a lot in Park City. A family history mentions that Pabla ran the mill with her son Juan Jose after her husband died. At some point, she moved from Park City to Cuba Road, which is where Cuba is. By the way, that's where I grew up, is in Cuba Road. And Socorro, most probably the same lot mentioned in the tax assessments. She may have moved there to be closer to her brother, Jose Torres y Padilla, who had property north of her own. Maria Pablo Torres Zimmerly passed away on July 23rd, 1917. Before she died, she saw many grandchildren born. One of the grandchildren, Maria Pablita Zimmerly, the daughter of Esteban and Delfina Zimmerly, received a gift from her grandmother to commemorate her birth and baptism. It was a drinking glass with the etching of the name that she and her grandmother shared, Pablo. I wish to end this presentation with one of the valiant Zimmerly family members. My grandmother's brothers joined the military after Pearl Harbor. We're talking about World War II, of course, okay? They all survived. However, one of their cousins made the ultimate sacrifice. And this would be, again, I hate to bring you up again, Chuck's uncle, okay? Lieutenant Edward Zimmerly, the son of Ricardo Zimmerly and Loisa Stackpole, was a navigator on the B-17 Flying Fortress, nicknamed the Chief Cook and his Bottle Washers. Yes, that was the name of the plane. It was the first mission on that particular bomber. He was killed by enemy fire on April 11th, 1944. His body was jettisoned by his crew members before the bomber crashed. The crew was captured, but his body was later recovered and returned to Socorro for burial. 3 months before his death, Lieutenant Zimmerly was featured in an AP article. He had survived a harrowing bombing mission over Germany. His B-17, the hit parade, was so badly damaged that he was reassigned to the chief cook and bottle washers. I'll read the abbreviated version, so I'm going to cut out some parts of the article, as it was published in the Milwaukee Journal on January 14th, 1944. Let me take a drink of water here.
And let me read this here.
Americans went through to targets in spite of desperate opposition by Gladwin Hill, London, England, AP. It was a grim aerial game of musical chairs, with one bomber moving up step by step, taking the place of others shot down. It was a shell fragment slicing an astonished gunner's ammunition belt, and a boy jabbing himself with morphine needle to numb an aching shoulder. It was the hell of a plane plunging wildly, and no certainty it was going to come out of it. The whole story of one of the war's great battles in America, air bombardment of the central Germany Tuesday, probably never will be told because of its 1,000 things to 1,000 men. More than 700 bombers spread over many miles of sky, and each one's experience was different. Some got through unscathed, and their crews couldn't believe that 60 of their bombers went down. Other flyers were amazed that they ever got home. Planes dropped like flies. The sky was smudged thicker and thicker with black explosions. Jagged fragments of German steel zinged through the layers of American duralumin, clanked against American armor plate, and slashed into American flesh. I saw our right-wing man go down in the smoke, said Waist Gunner Sergeant Everett E. Hudson of West Point, Mississippi. And when I looked out the other waist window, our left wing man was gone too. It seemed as if our planes were dropping like flies, ours as well as others. We were in the back of the formation when we started, Radecki said, but every time a flying fortress would go down, we would move up. By the time we got hit, we were on the lead squadron. Those fighters were coming frantically mad, and personally I was scared. Bombardier Lieutenant Walter Gibson of Linden, Illinois, confessed. The 9th German nailed by Radecki's hit parade, remember I mentioned that, crew plunged out of control and hit a nearby fortress, which burst into flames and crashed down across the hit parade's tail, shearing off most of the stabilizers. After a complete loop, we went into a spin, Radecki said. I told the boys to bail out. Before they could, I got the plane out of the spin. 5 fighters were on our tail, and I kept diving. 4 of them dropped off, and we went into a cloud. When we came out, the other fighters were gone. On 100 other ships, shells were smashing interphone lines over which men were frantically signaling. Fragments were cutting oxygen lines, sending men groping for emergency bottles. 40 below zero gales froze gunners' faces and hands. Bleeding men were lifted into the protection of radio rooms. Their uniforms were cut away, and sulfonamide powder was poured into their wounds. Thus, muscular hands fumbled with tiny morphine needles. The Germans kept after them most of the way back to the coast, 2 hours or more. Dusk was gathering and weather was thickening. It was the nose of the hit parade. Navigator Lieutenant Edward Zimmerly of Socorro, New Mexico lay flat on his face, peering through the glass for his home field. Many sat down at the first base they saw to get or aid the wounded. Lieutenant Jack Watson of Indianapolis came back all by himself in a plane so battered and burning he had to make the rest of the crew bail out as soon as they were over England. 60 of the bombers and 5 of the fighters didn't come back. Less than half of the casualties claimed in the historical communique from Hitler's headquarters, and only a third of the German casualties were admitted in the communique. Most of the American flyers came back, battered and undaunted, to find new replacement planes and crews waiting on the runways the next time to hear from the lips of high officials at home they had done a worthwhile job. The Germans had lost one of the war's big battles. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, go ahead, sir.
In Park City, that hotel that was there, what time they tore it down, I believe about 1950, 51.
Oh, really? Is there that long?
Yeah, it was there, we used to go down there and play. But I understand that that was, back then, they said it belonged to Cook,
Okay.
and it was a pretty nice place.
Okay.
And up above it was a pond and water.
Oh, very good, very good. It's too bad not much is left up there
No, there's
anymore.
nothing left of it.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Do you know anything about the staff home name? It just sort of showed up in the middle of all these other Hispanic names, and it doesn't sound,
Well, they weren't all Hispanic names. I also mentioned, so Stackpole,
yeah.
yes. So that is he was from Ireland, the specific person.
The other one sounded French.
Bourguignon.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually German. That's my second great grandfather on the other side. So Zimmerly is on my mom's side. He's my maternal grandmother's grandfather. Okay, and then Philip Bourguignon is on my father's side. He married into the Baca family. Okay, but as far as Stackpole, we're talking about. Richard Stackpole, who is from Ireland. Yeah. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Felipe Bourguignon is buried there in the
Okay.
retard. This is one of the descendants, Kennedy.
Okay.
His wife was a German, and he, what was he? He was French,
French and German.
French and German.
Okay.
But he's buried there in the old cemetery in the Vitale.
Who is this?
Philippe Bourguignon?
Philippe Bourguignon. Yes. Philippe Bourguignon. So, are you related to Philippe?
Yes.
Okay, so we're cousins then.
Yes.
Okay. Chuck, you're going to say something.
The Zimmerly descendant Richie, his dad was also Ricardo,
Yeah.
married a Stackpole. So the two families, that's when the two families came together.
Right. Right. So, yes. So that is that's where the Stackpole. So when I mentioned the other Civil War soldiers, because there were a lot of Hispanics who were Civil War soldiers, but there were a lot of Anglos who were Civil War soldiers in Socorro. That was kind of my point on that. It wasn't just the Hispanic families, but I wanted to bring in that. There's actually dozens, okay, of Civil War soldiers. The 1890 Civil War, there was one of the things that genealogists get really, really frustrated with is the fact that the 1890 census does not exist for most states. It was destroyed in the fire. However, a 1890 veteran schedule was there. So here is one of the pages of the schedule. This is from Ancestry.com. And you can see here, it says not stated, so I didn't say what city it's from. But you have like Socorro. And a lot of these, like for instance, my great grandfather, Samuel Zimmerly, he was dead by this time, but they mentioned his wife, okay, who was still alive. And she was, by the way, I have a lot of the records right here for Zimmerly's and such. You can see a lot of stuff I've collected, some stuff that I created, and all that. I also have a number of books over here on 4 sides of my family, Santiago Baca, who is my maternal grandfather, my mother's father, his wife, Pablita Zimmerly, my grandmother, Robert B. Baca, who is my paternal grandfather, and Maria Teresa Torres, my maternal grandmother. And then some information here about the Socorro land grant and such. I have quite a lot more information than this. I didn't want to overwhelm you. And you brought, who was it that brought this information over here? Yeah, it was you. Okay. There's some information right here. And your name again is?
Genevieve Baca.
Genevieve Baca, that's right. So Genevieve brought some information here. I also have a map here. This wasn't a real map, but it was based on what New Mexico looked like in 1880. So there's no freeways, but it's a nice little map I picked up at the Historical Society of New Mexico conference many years ago. So if you like to look at that, I have to put it in my classroom for people to see. Any other questions? I would have liked to have done a lot more stories, and there's like thousands, okay? I suggest that if you have family here or elsewhere for that matter, that if you decide to go into doing genealogy, that you actually publish a few things. And publishing could be just typing it out, okay? Giving it to your children, grandchildren, and so forth. Because there are so many stories. There are tons of stories I could have talked about. I've got a lot of the information I get are from census records, from old church records that go back into the 1700s and written in Spanish. I get a lot of information, more recent information from newspapers, including recent newspapers, which is how I find out how certain people are related to me. I figured out that at least 6 of my classmates were third cousins of mine. So it's one of those things. Any other questions? Or any other comments? Yes, sir.
But Limitor was the first county seat of Socorro County. I don't think a lot of people know that.
I think you might be right, yeah.
Yeah.
And San Marcial was the biggest town in Socorro County before the flood.
The trains are.
The trains came through and all that, yeah. But yeah, it's really interesting. You know, I have family from Limitar, from San Antonio, from Socorro, but basically my last ancestors to arrive in the Socorro area was my German Civil War soldier, great-great-grandfather Phil Bourguignon, in the 1850s, I think, Samuel Zimmerly, who came in the 1860s, and one of my grandmother's who was born in Mexico, but her family was from Socorro, because right after the Americans came in and took over New Mexico, many people went down to Mexico to get away from the American government, then decided, you know what, we don't like it here, and came back. So even though she was born in Mexico, her family's from Socorro. So basically, all my family have been here at the very latest, the 1860s. All right, yes?
I have a question about the land grant. Was the land grant from when New Mexico was part of Mexico, or was it from when New Mexico was part of Spain?
Late part of Spain.
Late part of Spain.
1821 is when Spain became Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah, or sorry, not Spain. Nueva España became Mexico.
So it was granted by the Spanish crown and then continued under the Mexican government, and then they tried to get recognition from the U.S. government,
Yeah.
and that's when it was denied.
So what happened is there's a lot of documentation. There were at least 2 petitions petitions in the early 1820s, actually may have been in 18 teens, that requested title. And the governor kept saying, okay, I'm gonna send I'll call it down there to do it, and then call it, say, I'm gonna do it, and we never got title. Basically what happened is a disputed document that was supposedly written by Manuel Armijo, who was the governor of, the Mexican governor of New Mexico, who lived in Lematar. He didn't live at that time, but he lived in Lematar. Supposedly approved the land grant under the Mexican period. However, and the reason why that piece of paper came out was because his son-in-law, Luis Maria Baca, again, one of my second great grand uncles, in other words, the brother of my great great grandfather, was the son-in-law of Armijo, and got the said, here's the document. It was disputed. Samuel Meek said, hey, that is Luis Maria Baca's handwriting. I can tell, and all this sort of stuff. And that was one of the reasons why the land grant in that iteration did not exist. However, Candelario Garcia, another relative of mine, like I said, they're all related to me, did get, actually it's written in law. You can still find it in the law books here in New Mexico. I've seen it. That says Candelaria Garcia and the city of Socorro and for the Socorro land grant. And so that 4 square acres, although it has all been sold off pretty much, that 4 square acres was recognized by the United States government.
So what happened to all the people who thought that they were part of the Socorro land grant?
A lot of them-
Title to anything?
A lot of them got title. Yeah. A lot of them got title, but there are a lot of people who married into the Hispanic families and got the title too, Anglos and such like that. And of course you had crooked people like, what's his name? He has a county named after him. Catherine, yes. Catherine stole a lot of that land too, so. Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting history. But again, I suggest that if you want to look into this, there's a lot of information out there. I use Ancestry, I use FamilySearch.org. I have a handout back there that has a lot of links to places that you can look, and so forth. Some of them are free, some of them you have to have a membership, but it's still free, and others, like Ancestry.com, you have to pay for. But if and then there's documents, plenty of documents around and stuff, and you can, paper documents, things that can be found in the courthouse and so forth. All right, yes?
I just wanted to say, one of my goals years ago was to write the history of the Socorro land grant.
Right.
And that is so confusing.
It is.
It's beyond belief. And then one of our local judge case had some of the hearings on that.
Oh, yeah.
So I went to him and asked him, could you explain to me the Socorro land grant?
Yeah.
And he says, it took me 6 years to figure that out, because that was the biggest bag of worms in my political career.
So let me explain something about property and water rights. Water rights are really important in New Mexico. You have to know US law, Mexican law, Spanish law, and also various, court cases regarding Native American tribes and stuff like that. Obviously, Native Americans didn't have the paperwork, but you have to know all of that to understand land grants, water rights here in New Mexico. It is, if you want to make a lot of money, be a land grant and water rights lawyer, because that's a lot of information. And Socorro is not unique in that, okay? I have a number of ancestors who had land grants or were part of community land grants, and they're all confusing. Socorro, though, had 3 court cases that it went through. 3 major court cases with the U.S. government before the 1900s. And they're all fairly complex, but you can find the information online. It's all there. You can find it on microfilm. On the actual documents, a lot of it is typewritten, but there is some handwritten stuff too. So some of it's in English, some of it in Spanish, and so forth. Okay. Any other questions?
Do you have your website on that link sheet? Didn't you say you have a website?
I have 2 websites. So yes, I have them on there. My 2 websites are the Baca Douglas, Baca Douglas family history. I forget what I have them. So there's 2 of them. And they're both blogs. Oops. I guess I can't bring it back up here. So the Baca Douglas Genealogy and Family History blog. And then I did the Socorro Land Grant Research Project. And both of those are listed on there. There are links on that site for other sites, other blogs. There's a Taurus, a different Taurus than the Taurus that I was mentioning before. There's 2 major Taurus families. One goes all the way back to the first Tauruses, and another one ends in Belen, because we don't know where it goes from there. Okay, probably to a maternal Taurus or something like that. And I'm related to both sides. Okay, on my dad's side I have the other Taurus family, and then on this side is the one that goes all the way back to.
Because there was Taurus before the Pueblo Revolt, right?
Yes, it's that family, yes, very much. Origins of New Mexico Families by Fray Angelico Chavez. There's a lot of mistakes on it, but it's still one of the best things written about New Mexico history and genealogy.
Excuse me, could you repeat that?
Origins of New Mexico Families by Fray Angelico Chavez, a priest. He wrote it originally in 1950 and then added a few things in the 90s, but most of it was in 1950. He didn't have a lot of the records. Other people found that and were able to find mistakes and stuff, but a lot of that is correct. A lot of that is good stuff and explains so much about New Mexico history and genealogy. Anything else? All right, thank you very much. If you have any other questions, feel free to
For those of you who might remember, years ago, one of my history articles I wrote for the Socorro Chieftain that came out on April 1st. And so the editor said, why don't you write a spoof article? So I did. Some of you might remember it. But it was basically the descendants of Adam and Eve had ended up over here to find out who they were and what was their last name. So the essence of the article was they were Bacchus.
Yeah, everyone of Hispanic origin from New Mexico has Baca ancestry in them. If you can go back to the 1700s, you have a Baca in there somewhere. And I've got a lot of them.
Anyway, enjoyed very much.
Thank you.
So, anyway, I guess now I introduce Chuck Zimmerly, who is one of the subjects that we've been learning about, who's the president of the Socorro County Historical Society, with just a few words on what the society's done over the last year.
Do you want me to continue recording, or do you want me to turn off the recording?
Stop the recording, so we're just gonna have the general.
Right.